Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. This article is from August of 1992. Exactly 30 years ago, the LA Slimes had run a piece in the wake of the Los Angeles uprising, which had taken place just a few months earlier. Its shockwaves were still reverberating throughout that city, throughout the nation, and the world. Now, for the handful of younger people who may not remember, the entire reason that the '92 LA uprising happened was because a Los Angeles-based street gang calling itself the LAPD had been found not guilty after 4 of their members had violently assaulted a black motorist, Rodney King, and what made it particularly egregious was they were caught on video doing it. This is the first time that anyone knew of such an attack hadn't been caught on video. It shocked the nation and the world. Now, it's important to remember how the black baby boomers reacted to this, as opposed to how the Gen Xers and Millennials and Gen Z crowd have reacted to the modern police violence we've been taking on. In 1992, the black community was still largely siloed in a white media bubble, where we were all being programmed to think that we were just all alone and whatever we thought, that was just us, and nobody else actually thought the same thing we did. And that if we were to take a direct hand in punishing the thugs in blue, well, that's radical and extremist, and worst of all, it doesn't have approval from the dominant societies, so black folks ought to just sit on their hands. We didn't have to wait 30 years to see the police punished. We could have stopped them any time we chose, but the catch is, we had to do it. The thugs are stopped when we stop them. But that's not what black folks were saying 30 years ago. Black people were blaming themselves, and many of them wallowing in self-pity. Black folks had looked to corrupt, bootlicking sellout puppets who the white media had called our leaders. They talked to the mayor and the governor, and nothing changed. Nothing got done. In the wake of that verdict to the Rodney King beating, black people blamed themselves. Nothing changed, even with riots. So, what's different now? People went to the police's homes. They took the fight directly to the police themselves. They made it clear that the police and the DAs would be held accountable by the people if they ignored the law. People stopped playing along with the lie that the police were untouchable and that there was just this public support that refused to hold them accountable. Everybody knew that the DAs were throwing these cases. They knew it was all rigged, and they told them the game was up. Period. And what a surprise. Now the police are being routinely convicted, and we didn't need to talk to any mayor or to any governor or anyone else. We didn't need to hold an election. Simply making it clear that the people would ensure justice was done was all it took. How very different the reaction of this younger generation has been, and its results. But I bring your attention to this article because this is a case study of what was going on exactly 30 years ago in a social climate very similar to the one that we're in now, and for the same reasons. The article says some of the nation's oldest civil rights organizations, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Urban League, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, have been accused of being hopelessly stuck in the past and of failing to address the pressing economic and social problems that helped fuel the unrest. Some of Los Angeles black churches also have not escaped the barbs. So we see that the exact same cast of characters who were being called out for pretending to lead black folks back in the 90s are the same bought and paid for Negroes that we're still taking on today. Though it is interesting that even the white media had to say that the pressing concerns were economic first and social second. The article goes on to say, perhaps the most telling illustration of the gulf that some contend exists between black leadership and the black community was beamed into millions of homes after the King verdicts were returned and the violence had begun. On that night, local television stations juxtaposed scenes of raging fires with footage of politicians, ministers, and heads of various civil rights organizations inside the First African Methodist Episcopal Church urging restraint, planning for the future, and listening to uplifting songs by the choir. Reporters noted that those in the church seemed oblivious to the mayhem unfolding beyond its doors. Well, I can correct the white media on that one. It's not that these do-nothing Negroes were oblivious to what was going on outside. They were desperately trying to wish it away. Now, a community activist named Dr. James Mays said all the lambs were at First AME. The lions were all in the street. It's not a criticism, he said, it's a fact. In order for us to avoid a recurrence, we are going to have to bring the lions in with the lambs. Lions and lambs indeed. Unfortunately, lions and lambs don't mix, brother. The only thing lambs get is slaughtered. Lambs get turned to lamb chops, mutton chops, lamb stew. Lambs become dinner. You can't defend a community with lambs. You want to know why there's no such thing as lion chops, or lion burgers, or lion steaks? It's because a lion will rip you to shreds before you even get a chance to ask how he tastes. This shows you that the bootlick strategy has always been the same. There will never be an instance when these political whores take the side of the young people in the streets. These civil rights retreads and pulpit pimps are social climbers, nothing more. They want to stay on the good side of the white powers that be, and making sure white supremacists who attack black people are punished harshly isn't what white power wants, so the bootlicks know they better not rock the boat. All you have to do is replace the words in this article like Los Angeles and Mayor Bradley with the name of the black mayor of Baltimore or Dallas or whatever city or black corrupt leader you're talking about. It's the same cast of characters because it's the same script playing itself out over and over again. Except this generation flipped the script. We realize that these racists will have us on a treadmill to nowhere forever if we let them. What happened in 2020 was the young people simply got tired of playing along with what they knew to be lies. In 2020, they all saw that the people would make sure the prosecutors themselves would be punished right alongside the police. And then we saw the lies stop overnight. Now there's no longer the old lie that grand juries won't indict or that trial juries won't convict. The DAs and the police are mad. But they also understand that since they've already shown that they can indict and they can convict very easily, well, too late to go back now. And so we see these judges who are the ones doing the dirty work acting as the last ditch for the enforcement arm of white supremacy. But the people will put pressure on these corrupt judges as well. But the same bootlicking frauds that we see today were the same clowns who were operating 30 years ago in the exact same way. Negroes telling black people to forgive, 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 and we can touch the hearts of these white supremacists with the love of Jesus. But what's also not new is that these frauds who the white media tries to say speak for us, they're just running one big finesse. The LA Times article mentions a woman named Letty Taylor, who they describe as a 32-year-old mother of three who recently attended the Urban League's national convention in San Diego. Miss Taylor was not one of the 18,000 largely black, mostly middle-class and professional delegates who paid $170 each to hear an address by Democratic presidential candidate Governor Bill Clinton and to attend such seminars as Making It, Leaving the Corporate Career Track for Entrepreneurship. Did you get that? The Urban League's national convention had 18,000 attendees who paid $170 apiece to hear Bill Clinton, who at that time was just a presidential candidate, speak. So it's not just luncheons and fish fries that these bootlick groups are pulling. Oh, and just to put that into a dollar figure for you, 18,000 times 170 is over $3 million. All that in one day just to hear a presidential candidate speak. And of course, Billy Boy didn't get all of that money. The Urban League pocketed the rest. So these clowns are running a finesse. They give money to DNC candidates, which ingratiates them with the white left, and they slice off a big piece to keep for themselves. This is the self-perpetuating cycle of corruption and cash that white power uses to make sure these misleaders stay on the plantation and try to keep you and me there as well. And of course, there are other examples of the Urban League finessing. The Los Angeles Times piece also mentions John Mack, who spent 20 years as head of the Urban League's Los Angeles branch. Mack befriended the white power structure in Los Angeles and finessed himself and his pals a multi-million-dollar concession at Los Angeles Airport. Now, this Mack guy was quoted as saying the problem isn't that black leadership has failed, it's that white leadership hasn't listened. Well, he sure seems able to get their attention, for himself at least. Mack then said that calling black leaders out of touch was in vogue right now. That's how he dismissed it. Oh, well, they're just saying that because it's fashionable to say that black leaders are out of touch. It's what's in vogue right now. That was 30 years ago when he said that, family. 3 decades ago. Well, here we are a generation and a half later. Do you see anyone saying that the Urban League has finally gotten back in touch with the black community yet? After 3 decades, has the Urban League finally regained the respect and attention of young black people yet? Or are they doing just like the NAACP and trying to diversify and spread out to anybody, preferably non-black, who they can get some support from? And by the way, if this do-nothing mouthpiece trying to finesse himself some government cash sounds familiar to you, it should. Remember that in September 2020, in the waning days of the Trump administration, no less than Roly-Poly Martin himself had gotten $250,000 from the Trump administration's own Census Bureau. So while Roly-Poly was griping about Donald Trump by day, by night, he was getting himself some government money from the same Trump administration. These phony black leaders are all operating out of the same playbook of trying to finesse themselves some government cash. It doesn't matter if these are phony politicians or so-called civil rights groups or these bootlick media types. Now, the piece goes on to talk about National Urban League President John E. Jacob at the time, who said, "Are we going to reach brothers and sisters standing on the corners with their fist raised? Probably not." Well, so much for an urban league. They can't even stand in league with black folks in the urban centers. The reason the Urban League won't reach out to the people on the corners with their fists raised is because reaching out to them would make it awkward for the John Jacobs and other political prostitutes to then go and hang out with the white power brokers who they want money from. The job of the John Jacobs is to control the young people with their fists up. Jacob then went on to say, "The Urban League can't be all things to all people. It's a mistake, particularly that the media makes, thinking that organizations like the Urban League can do everything." That's a straw man lie. Nobody was or has ever told the Urban League or any of these other do-nothing organizations to do everything. Oh, these clowns want to feel so put upon. Oh, they're just putting the weight of the world on our shoulders. Yeah, while they're busy getting concessions from the city government of Los Angeles and hanging out with the mayor and the governor. Oh, they're just so put upon. Black people have simply told the Urban League to do just one thing. And that is to boldly speak for our people or lead us in revolt against the forces of oppression against us. Other than stand behind some lectern and give some windblown speech about the glory days of the 60s and how they marched with Dr. King, can anyone tell me anything that the Urban League or the NAACP or any of these other social groups has done for black people? What have they done to fight back against the forces of oppression against us? Not just speak, but actually to fight back and to put some points on the board and to punish the bastards. What have they done to put tangibles in our pockets or to punish the people who attack us? I'll wait. The Times piece then cites a man named Danny Bakewell of the Brotherhood Crusade. He spearheaded boycotts of several South Central Los Angeles stores owned by Korean American merchants where African American customers had been beaten or killed. More recently, to ensure that blacks participate in the rebuilding of their community, Bakewell has been shutting down construction sites that do not employ African Americans, temporarily putting Latino laborers and others out of work in the process. By the way, how many times have they ever mentioned black folks who get put out of work because of illegal labor from south of the border? But they'll go ahead and shoehorn in there that they're putting Latino laborers out of work. Anyway, to move on, they next quote a man named Clyde Johnson, who heads the Los Angeles County Black Employees Association, as saying this city needs more Danny Bakewells who uncompromisingly will defend the rights of African Americans. Mr. Johnson went on to say, "I think we're going to see a lot more emerge out of the rank and file." And he was right. Just that the rank and file wouldn't be the black baby boomers. It's the rank and file who are putting in the work today. Change has not and will never come from the Congressional Black Talkers or these other sock puppet groups. And I'm sure that you noticed that Mr. Johnson used the word uncompromisingly. This was 30 years ago, but even then there were some black people with their heads on straight. There is no substitute for prioritizing what you need and not apologizing for doing it. It's not about being popular. It's about being powerful. Everybody else operates that way. Black people are the only ones trying to turn their entire group into some sort of global charity. The LA Times piece then turns back to Bakewell, and it writes, other leaders may be hesitant to engage in confrontational tactics because, Bakewell said, everybody wants to be nice. They don't want the powers that be to see them as someone who will challenge them. That's from 30 years ago. Black people were saying it then. But we didn't have an apparatus in place to consolidate all this black indignation and discontent. Black people knew what the problem was and why nothing was getting done. Then the white media throws the usual lies into the mix. They first admit the black church has been lax and out of touch with the community, especially the young. Okay, so far so good, but of course, predictably, in the very next sentence, the white media's LA slime says that the churches are scared of gangs. Most young black people aren't in any doggone gangs. This is the crap coming from the newspaper that brags that it's all the news that's fit to print. News, is that how they spell lies? These are white racists who are saying that all young black people are in gangs. This is a white media narrative that you got the LA slimes constructing here. Their choice of wording and the way that they set this up was deliberate. It's meant to dovetail with itself. First, you got that Urban League clown saying, are we going to be able to reach the brothers on the corner with their fists raised? Probably not. Now they turn to the NAACP and they're saying that all these young folks that the church aren't able to reach, they're gangs. They're all in gangs. That's the narrative that they're trying to push. Those young people with their fists in the air, the lions, as Mr. Bakewell called them, well, they're just a bunch of gangbangers. You can go ahead and dismiss them. They're all just a bunch of criminals. Why, even the black church is scared of them. Black youth, even these black folks, they're scared of these youth, just like all these white supremacist racists out here are. The problem for the black church is they want to be mobbed up with white political power. They're out of touch with black youth because these black churches are nothing more than cheap money-making schemes for former pimps, street hustlers, and in many cases, pedophiles. These black churches have contempt for black people, especially young black people, and the white media knows it, which is why they didn't bring up how Dr. King routinely challenged white politicians and how these black churches don't. Their refusal to challenge white power is exactly where they're lax. But, of course, this is the white media, so they gotta sprinkle sugar on their crap. They, of course, use the NAACP to corroborate their lie that young black people are all gangbangers. They quote an NAACP rep named Shannon Reeves. Now, the piece mentions him because he was the youngest person ever to hold a consequential position in the NAACP. And Reeves said, some seasoned leaders may not want to deal with gang members. I have to because that's my generation. This is a lie that plays to every racist anti-black stereotype out there, that the black youth are all in gangs, the entire freaking generation. These are not black citizens demanding that criminals in the government be held accountable. Why, these are gangbangers and criminals. You can just go ahead and dismiss them. This is what the white media is putting out there. And who needs the Republicans when you got the sentiment of the NAACP agreeing with this racist lie? Now, the LA piece of propaganda also quotes Reeves as saying one of the biggest dilemmas confronting civil rights leaders is remembering their constituency. Can you believe that? That's the biggest dilemma confronting civil rights leaders, to remember their constituency. As Reeves said, many times you get hung up in meetings with the governor and with the mayor. That begins to be your group of association because you're constantly in battle with that level. You spend less time in the projects in the inner city. The challenge for organizations is to truly base themselves in the community. Well, at least the last part is accurate because the scumbags in the NAACP and the Urban League and others, they're not battling the governor or the mayor. They're yucking it up with them, glad-handing and trying to finesse themselves some city government money at LAX. That's what they're actually doing. But Reeves was right. The NAACP's biggest problem, according to him, was remembering who their constituency is. In other words, remembering who the hell they're supposed to be working for. Their biggest problem isn't confronting white power. It's not making sure police are punished. It's not getting black people the resources we require. Their biggest problem for these civil rights groups is to merely remember who the hell they're supposed to be working for. Well, you know what? I can go ahead and provide an answer for Mr. Reeves' little dilemma. The problem isn't that these phony black organizations forgot who their constituents are. It's that they're ignoring black people. That's why they were set up. The NAACP didn't turn their backs on black people in just the last 15 years alone. You can look here and see they did it decades ago. In fact, they did it long before the '92 uprising in LA. It's just that the white media kept these groups on life support by continuing to give them TV airtime and radio airtime, go ahead and keep them in the public eye, and giving them column space in white publications like the LA Times. Black people saw these guys being the only ones given a platform and continued to figure, well, somebody must be following these jokers. Otherwise, why would the white media have them on TV and in the papers? But of course, what do you expect from organizations created by white power? To say that it's a challenge for them to truly base themselves in the black community, that is the final indictment of organizations that were already condemned a long time ago. For them to base themselves in the community that they're supposed to be serving, that's going out of their way as they see it. So what the hell do we need these groups for then? Nothing. Then why does the white media continue to put them on TV and try to pretend like they're our leaders and like they have any sort of authority or legitimacy? It's because these civil rights groups were inventions of white power. White power created them and needs us to sit on our hands and wait for these puppets to do something on our behalf. Well, as John Jacobs said, they're not going to do anything. But that's okay, because as we've seen in recent years, there's a generation that will. Our generation knows that the only thing the white supremacist understands is force. Prove that you won't hesitate to use force to protect yourself and to ensure that justice is done, and these bastards will back down. The young people who took the fight to the thugs with badges literally had them bending the knee in 2020. On the other hand, if you prove that you're weak and that you refuse to use force in your own self-defense and or to make sure that justice is done, then the white supremacists will just keep right on attacking. One of the most sophisticated and devious aspects of mind control is to make the person being controlled think that the very thing that will set them free is wrong, that they shouldn't do it. Either it's too difficult, or it's too destructive, or it's otherwise unthinkable, or it's unpopular. You get them to rein themselves in. Now, the reason I mention this story is because exactly 30 years ago, there were uprisings in retaliation for police targeting black people for murder and assault, and the groups telling us to just march and chant and do nothing. When they were called out on their refusal to act, they said, "We can't do everything." You know who they sound like? Just like Tyrannosaurus Burke, the so-called founder of the MeToo hashtag. When she got called out for her selective outrage, she of course said, "Why is it my job to go after white men?" Nobody told her to go after white men. They told her to go after the ones who sexually assault black women. But we see the same dodge and deflection being used over and over again, year in and year out, decade in and decade out. So you see how different things are today, though. And it didn't happen by listening to the do-nothing bootlicks. It happened because black folks rejected them and ignored them. It happened by delegitimizing these bootlick mouthpieces. We didn't waste time trying to get them to change. Instead, we marginalized them, put them in a corner, and told them, "You better not move." We backed up the young people in the streets, and that's what changed the status quo. But white power hasn't abandoned the NAACP or the Urban League or Al Sharpton. These clowns are controlled opposition, and you and I are the ones they're supposed to be controlling. The white media only pretends to not approve of the Messy Jessies and the Al Sharptons. The white media only pretends to have a problem with them because that's supposed to build credibility in our eyes. We're supposed to think, oh, well, the white media is giving a tisk to these guys while giving them tons of airtime, by the way. So they must be on the sides of the people. That's what we're supposed to think. But actions speak far louder than words. And when it comes time to act, these sorry sellouts talk no differently than the white media does. And they act no differently than the police or any other bootlicking politician. And that's why we stopped listening to them. The times may change, but the lies and the liars remain the same. Unfortunately for them, we haven't. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Sonia Willisey, Wesley Monroe, Rowlett Churchwell, Cedric Etheridge, and Josh Heath. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.